hide, but you'll never get away.
Drop it! Buster. What were you gonna do, huh?
Nothing. I was just playing around.
Well, we're playing now.
Like, it was neither good nor bad. It's just kind of inert, if anything. I think it's superficially well made. The music, the costumes, the photography, the 1980s aesthetic, it's all on point, especially for a movie that reportedly cost about $1 million.
What?
But I find that this movie is as hollow as the decade that it is set in. It's essentially, Ty West's take on Brian De Palma. But, like, who even among the general audience even understands these references that he's making? It just seems so, just indulgent. And he seems intent on just proving his, horror film nerd credentials. And he forgot to make a compelling narrative. And I think that at this stage of his career, I think Ty West is dangerously close to becoming the next Eli Roth. Welcome to Theater and Stream, a film podcast. I am Matt, that is Chuck, and this is episode 47. The final film in Ty West's Unexpected X trilogy is here. It started out as a taut 70s slasher film, then kind of evolved into a Wizard of Oz type character study, and now we've sort of settled into Brian De Palma land with MaXXXine. We have reviewed all 3 films on this very channel, so go and get our thoughts on X, go and get our thoughts on Pearl, and then come back here and we'll dive into the third entry in about 45 minutes or so. But we've also got a heaping handful of news to get into. We've got all the other stuff we've been watching with the Mentionables, or with the Watchlist, I'm sorry. And then we'll get to our Mentionables, where we talk about our one non-film recommendation for the week. And before we get started in earnest, I guess a little bit of housekeeping and announcements here. Go and watch Chuck's minisode. That one is all about this conversation that Spielberg, George Lucas had about a decade ago, and kind of how it relates to all of this talk about the death of cinema nowadays. That video is doing really, really well for us. So if you haven't watched it yet, please do go and watch it. Anything you wanted to say about that, Chuck, before we get started?
Thank you to everyone who hit the subscribe button after watching it, and everyone who left a comment. It really struck a chord, and I feel bad for taking so long to talk, make it happen, because I had alluded to it like almost a month ago now, essentially. But it still is relevant, and no one's really connected the dot from that moment, at that conversation, and just how prescient they were. And it's a fascinating clip. It's the only one that exists is from CNBC for some reason, and it's truncated. If you really want the full breadth of the conversation, there's a Variety article that's floating around out there, and I think like the Hollywood Reporter did one too at the time. And if you care about video games, they had some interesting thoughts. They predicted the rise of the female protagonist in video games, and how that would be the sea change for the industry to a degree. I don't think they predicted how noxious the discourse over certain creative decisions would become, but at the same time, their ideas of how VR and cinema will merge were also equally terrifying, and probably true, especially when you look at how Sony is prioritizing their development calendar. But yeah, it's very fascinating, and it always had stuck with me over the years, because I've just been waiting for certain things to become true, and a lot of those boxes have been checked. But to get started here, we have to say goodbye to our boy Robert Towne. When I first started becoming interested in screenwriting, I picked up Sid Field's book, which is what at the time, before Save the Cat, that's what you did, and the first chapter or so of Sid Field's book is breaking down the first scene in Chinatown and just how like perfect it is. And of course that's the movie that this man will forever be known for. You know, he won the Oscar for it. But I just want to point out the sheer breadth of this man's career as a credited screenwriter and as like a gun for hire uncredited script doctor. You name it, he has been involved in it. Like as a director, he has a bit more of a spotty career, but the fact that, you know, he did the first two Mission Impossible movies is pretty nuts. I had forgotten about that. And I also had forgotten about the Mississippi Breaks and Greystoke, like probably the best Tarzan movie that's ever been made. Like he has a very fascinating career, and he was a fascinating character and just preeminent when it, you know, when you thought about like the classic, you know, 70s Hollywood screenwriter.
Yeah. I was going to bring up the ghostwriting because he seemed to almost embrace the role of the ghostwriter where, you know, he would come in for a couple days, punch up a script, or he'd hang out on set during production and do sort of some on the fly rewrites. And I was, you know, watching an interview with him, and he sort of compared himself to like a relief pitcher in baseball.
There you go.
And he very, he embraced that. When I think a lot of times people don't really embrace ghostwriting nowadays. They think of it as something you should be almost ashamed of or something.
Yeah, they're resentful of not actually being the guy, you know, and like so it's good for him because he probably saved a lot of movies over the years.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a bunch of them, and then I'll add to it. Bonnie and Clyde, Heaven Can Wait, The Godfather. He did a uncredited punch up on The Godfather.
And I did not know that kind of surprised me.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And he had this. You mentioned the Mission Impossible movies, but he had like a whole like weird like Tom Cruise movie phase because he did Days of Thunder, The Firm, and then those two Mission Impossible movies. So I don't know what was going on there. He must have, you know, struck up a friendship with Cruise or something like that. But yeah, very, very prolific, varied career.
Either that or he was a secret Scientologist. But at any rate, we salute the man. We'll always remember him. Go watch a Robert Towne movie. Tonight, whenever you watch this, just be reminded that the last like 50 years or so of Hollywood was largely formed by some of the foundational, his contributions to the canon, as it were, of cinema in America. And speaking of that, the modern canon for this year, is kind of relevant to our interests because we are now kind of thinking about at the midway point, of the year, what's our favorites? And why don't we get started with you?
Yeah, just wanted to touch on our favorites of the year so far. I guess I'll just say mine. Mine are The Taste of Things, Exuma, Dune Part 2, The Promised Land, and Perfect Days. And I don't know, I was trying to think of a way to talk about these. I don't know if there's any sort of common thread. I've got a French film about cooking, a Korean horror movie, a sci-fi blockbuster, a Danish historical epic, and then a Japanese indie movie. And so I guess if there is anything to say, I've got a propensity for like foreign films. Two, I do like this trend of directors going into sort of foreign countries and making a film within those cultures, other cultures and other societies. And there's a bit of that here with Wim Wenders is a German filmmaker, and he made Perfect Days in Japan. And then An Hung Tran is from Vietnam, and he made a film in France with The Taste of Things.
That's right.
So I'm kind of a fan of directors doing that. I think it's kind of a little bit of a trend we see nowadays. But yeah, I mean, if there's any of these that I wanted to touch on in a more specific way, I guess it's Perfect Days, because I never talked about that on the show before. And It's because it's kind of it's a very quiet film, very meditative. It's basically a slice of life movie about a guy who cleans toilets in Japan,
Ah,
and how he basically it's about sort of being open to breaking your routines every once in a while, and how it can sort of lead to a more fulfilling life. And yeah, really, really enjoyed that one. But the last thing I wanted to say is now that some time has passed, pretty much all of my films are on various streaming services. And so I just want to give people a heads up that like Perfect Days and The Promised Land are on Hulu, and Exuma is now on Shudder, and The Taste of Things is on AMC Plus. So if for some reason your sort of barrier to watching any of these was the amount of money that you had to give, go and watch them now because they're all on streaming services.
I had noticed the Promised Land and Perfect Days popping up, and
Mhm.
I've been meaning to watch them, but I'm married to a lady who is averse to subtitles and,
Mm.
just foreign films in general. Not because she's, xenophobic or anything, but I think it ties into something we're going to discuss in a little bit here. She's just a little overstimulated, and it's a little bit exhausting to watch certain movies. So if, my list is kind of tailored around what we have watched for. Oh, I guess I have a typo in there, because because these are the ones we've reviewed and and actually featured on this show, because those are the ones I get to prioritize. She can't say no to me when I want to watch them, and so yeah, doing part 2, Love Lies Bleeding, Hitman. That's what it should be, Hitman there. Last Stop in Yuma County, and Fallen Leaves, which might be cheating now that I think about it, because is that technically a 2023 movie? It was new to us when we reviewed it in 2024. That's all I know.
Yeah. I think it's US. I always go by when the movie was released in the US.
Yeah,
And so I think you're safe there. Yeah.
that's what Kirk Kermode, Mark Kermode, does. That's how he does it, because the Britain, they get things at really odd times compared to the rest of the world. But yeah, one of these I didn't expect to have on here at all, which was Love Lies Bleeding, but that film has grown in my feelings towards it, just because its style and its subject matter was so unique. And I think if there, other than Dune, if there was a movie that I enjoyed more than any other, it was Fallen Leaves. It was just such a pure slice of life experience, and quite unlike anything that we get typically stateside here, from Hollywood. I forgot how I was setting this up, but there's not only a lack of curiosity and exploration in some of the movies that get made here in America, but the audience has also kind of changed in significant ways as of late. And there was a YouTuber released an essay that really struck a chord with me, so I put it on the dock for a topic of discussion. His name is Stories of Old, and he does really good content. The man's got a Patreon. He has supporters, so I find him quite credible, in most of what he has to say. And he was really driven by the question of, do people even like movies anymore? It was broken up into various sections where he digs into certain aspects of it, and we'll start with the literally me era of it, which is mostly tailored towards male audiences, of course, because there was just so much content that we could glom onto to build our identity. That's a very nice heart. Good job. So people who are into Patrick Bateman and Tyler Durden and the driver from Drive and that kind of thing. But yeah, how would you define the appeal behind that movement within the audience?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's basically about how society has become obsessed with movies that are relatable because of the personal curation of social media. It's basically social media has given us the ability to act like certain people, places, or things don't exist. You can literally make it so you don't see certain things online, and you never have to see them. You can act like certain political beliefs don't exist in the world. You can kind of put yourself in a bubble, and basically that has sort of led to this idea that like in order for us to like things, we have to relate to it on some sort of like personal level, or it has to be like a incredibly personal story to us, or we have to share, the character's political beliefs, or we have to share their, background, whether that be like ethnically or like, you know, anything else. And so, yeah, that's kind of the first point he touches on.
Yeah, and it kind of ties into the main event here for today, which is MaXXXine, which even like yeah, starting with Pearl, really like that trilogy really kind of filled the female aspect of that,
Mhm.
or even like that movie we just what was it called again with the tennis movie
Oh, challengers.
Challengers, that too, where people glom onto some of the most reprehensible characters for reasons that are really questionable and dubious, but
Yeah.
makes sense if you're constructing your identity through the media you watch or the clips that scroll through your TikTok. And and like another thing that kind of came up in his video too, was the idea that born from TikTok in particular, that the people who are high-minded about the movies that they consider their favorites are just pretentious dweebs, and I took offense to that as a film snob, because
Mhm.
like it should be okay for you to like Iron Man 2 more than any other movie that's ever been made. That's a valid opinion, and I suppose it is, but like if you're trying to make a statement, based off of that, what does that actually say about you? Do you think?
Yeah. Oh man, it's sort of this rise of like anti intellectualism where like people are almost proud of the fact that they are like perceived as being dumber than, other people, or like proud of the fact that like I don't like this thing that is perceived as pretentious by other people. And I don't know. I guess it's to me, I personally think that presenting yourself as having a well-rounded taste includes both of those things, as far as like it's okay to like both things. You can like I thought Avengers Endgame was a massive achievement, but I also liked, a film like Perfect Days. And I don't know, for some reason
One second.
they had those two things have somehow like splintered off into like two factions, where it's like people are proud of being dumb over here, and then the people over here are just like way too high-minded to even think about liking any sort of blockbuster. And I don't know, it's weird. It's really, really weird to me. People almost look at liking films before like the 1970s as like you're like a weirdo. Like if you say like, oh, I like films from like the 50s. I like black and white movies from, the 40s. People like are like, "Oh, who's this weirdo?" It's akin to being like, I like Baroque art, or something like that. Like and yeah, just very, very strange.
It is strange because like when I think of some of the more important movies to me personally,
Mhm.
like a lot of them are black and white. Like the Maltese
Yeah.
Falcon doesn't you don't get anything out of that. You don't get anything out of even like a Humphrey Bogart, Casablanca. I've named a bunch of his movies right there. But or even like the best years of our lives. I watched that movie like every Veterans Day because it
Mm.
just is thematically, like that's what it's about. It's about soldiers coming home after World War II, and it handled things in a very modern way. Like if you think that movies, pre 1970 have nothing to say to us today, then yeah, I guess you just don't care about that aspect of it, and you're just looking for stimulation. And yeah, everything has gotten a lot more stimulating over the years. The filmmaking techniques and the styles, are definitely, tailored towards capturing your attention instead of making use of it, for something meaningful. And yeah, I think
Hmm.
that kind of drives a large part of the disconnect.
Yeah, and it's also like,
In a second, honey. I'll
um,
set it up in a second.
going back to the sort of, I think it's the second point he makes in this video. It's people have become obsessed with judging a movie's value based on how it reflects their beliefs back at them.
Yeah.
Where like I see so many so-called professional reviews nowadays, professionally written reviews, where the reviewer sees an endorsement or like a condemnation of a film as not only like a judgment on the film itself, but also a chance to make some sort of statement about their beliefs to sort of like win someone over to your side, basically. And he actually uses in his video, this guy, he uses past lives as an example of a film in his video essay.
Yeah.
And I find that interesting because that was a film that I personally did not like. And I was sort of upfront with the fact that I didn't like it because of the movie's sort of bankrupt morals, in my opinion, where I think that that movie has devastatingly self-centered views on romantic relationships and the idea of cheating on your partner. And I was upfront with that fact, and I don't think a lot of people are being upfront with that fact, though. They are saying like, I don't like this movie, but I'm going to give all these other. I don't like this movie because of what it's saying to me politically or because it's challenging my beliefs, but I'm going to instead say all these other things, as reasons why, because they don't want to confront that fact that it makes
Yeah.
them uncomfortable.
Yeah, because there's also kind of like you're predisposed to, support something as opposed
Mhm.
to grappling, with, what it's trying to say to you, or how it genuinely makes you feel. Like the yeah, because there is kind of a divide politically within the critic space where you know exactly where Chris Gore is going to land on a movie, because he's
Mhm.
kind of leaning into that right of center pop culture grifter mindset. And there are certain times where it's like he will, like, when he's critiquing a movie, I've noticed it will, he is talking to the audience that has captured him. What
Yeah.
and that's true of people who are like, oh, The Acolyte is the best thing since sliced bread. It makes Star Wars the way I wish it always has been. And then there are those who are utterly against it because of they're on the opposite end of that spectrum. And then there's, me in the middle, who has been turning on episodes and turning them off because it's just bad. Like it can't just, you have to have some sort of, your self-righteous or moralistic reason driven by your, ideology or your politics. Like that's why people wanted Joker to fail, because for
Yeah.
some reason, like before the movie was even out, it was viewed as like something that was supporting the incel point of view. So for that reason, it automatically was bad and it was going to inspire violence. I don't remember if you yeah, like if you recall that
Yes.
particular
Hmm.
moral panic that occurred before that movie came
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. People
Security
were
guard,
afraid of like theater shootings and stuff.
yeah, yeah, and then people did watch that movie and fall right into the literally me trap that did happen, but no one was walking around in Joker outfits like pulling guns out in subways and murdering people. Like that happens for other reasons that
Yeah.
people don't want to confront in the real world. But yeah, the and that but at the same time, like it locks people into not giving something a chance. And when I was, watching this video, this was the moment that made me take pause and go, okay, how am I like this? How have I fallen into the my own self-righteousness and my own moralism? Has it,
Mhm.
genuinely prevented me from, considering like a movie, giving it a chance to even see it in the first place? And there are probably a lot of movies that are probably worth watching in retrospect that I've just avoided because I've just told myself it's not worth your time. It will just make you mad or upset or something like that. And so I kind of felt inspired to change a little bit. But that of course is difficult because, as we mentioned, there's overstimulation in the world today. And that just creates a kind of exhaustion. We're always just scrolling, we're looking at our feeds, we're getting notifications left, right, and center. And not only does that make it difficult for our attention span to reset for something 90 minutes, let alone 3 hours long, but it also just, drives you towards comforting things. Like that's why people are watching nothing but Suits in the office.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, one thing with this sort of other point he gives about the overstimulation that you're talking about and being burnt out, one thing he doesn't touch on in the video that I want to sort of expand on this idea with is people, it's not important to actually watch the thing a lot of times nowadays. It's just important that others perceive you as having watched the thing.
Yeah.
So like, a lot of people will, there's so much content out there nowadays, it would be impossible to watch it all. And people instead basically just assure themselves that like certain stuff couldn't possibly be worth their time, but they still sort of feel as if they should be able to pass judgment on it in some way. So, I mean, there are certain things that people have never watched that they still, go on to Letterbox and hit, two stars, 1 star, even though they never even watched it because they just assume how they are going to feel about it. And even worse than that, there are films that people just straight up lie about having seen because, they feel as if it gives them some sort of, film snob credentials or something like that. And so I wanted to hit on that point because there are certainly, people who are lying about having seen certain stuff. And it's all about, as with many things with social media, it's all about other people think you have seen something, not actually sitting down and having watched it to get the experience.
And I think to some degree, for the people who are downranking a movie publicly without actually having seen it, they might just be reacting to the memification of it. Because like even though they haven't seen it, it's just in their face and they resent it for that fact. And but now that's a very good point that I hadn't quite thought of, actually. The idea that it's all just fugazi keeping up appearances. And because you fake it. We're not making it anywhere, but you just know that like people can see you, and you live in public, so you act accordingly, and you want to have the right opinion too, because a lot of these kind of feed into each other, which is these aspects that he's getting into. But like, what did you make of the closing segment of about seeking true nourishment?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, he says in the video, I want to end this on a bit of a positive note. And so his final point is basically about how, we should be seeking these movies that challenge us, that we wouldn't normally think that we would like, because who knows, maybe you will, or, movies that are 3 hours long, or movies that are about a subject that you don't think you would find interesting, and sort of making yourself a more well-rounded person. And I found that to be a very, very nice note to end the video on. And I like this question you put in our doc, basically like, what is the last film that you think that you watched that was actually like nourishing to you on a completely holistic level? And I'm curious to know, what is your answer for that?
And honestly, it's Fallen Leaves. It
Okay.
it just made my soul soar. Because it's just such a simple movie, and it was so like just gorgeously assembled, and I just felt so alive. After the credits rolled. And usually I have like a pit in my stomach of disappointment when a movie's over because I have to go back to reality. But in that moment, I was like, huh, I can go back into my life, having like, feeling great knowing that I've experienced this, beyond just the nostalgia, exhilaration from Dune 2, which of course kind of had a similar effect on me, but that was the Fallen Leaves was more of a surprising thing. And I just want to say, even though I haven't seen, some of the movies, I know that the taste of things would probably have that effect on me, or that
Yeah.
like, like I don't know, or Exuma even would probably, you'll really get my soul, uplifted in a way that it normally, wouldn't be when I'm just watching slop like the last Omen or the first Omen. There's a lot that you can get out of any movie, like
Yeah.
even the bike riders. Like, I liked hanging out with that crowd, even though that movie was ultimately a little disappointing, but it
Mhm.
still was a lot more interesting than just your, like watching 8 seasons of Son of Anarchy, and it takes, a fraction of the time to get the same experience,
Yeah.
basically. What about
Mhm.
yourself?
Yeah, my personal for that one was, well, I'm glad you brought up A Taste of Things because that I hadn't quite considered that fully, but yeah, I think I mean that if I of those five movies I gave earlier, that is probably my number one of the year, and that movie did give that sort of sense of um, yeah, exhilaration at the end of it. But even before that, I don't know why this keeps coming up for me because it was literally like 5 years ago. But I think about Terrence Malick's A Hidden Life
Oh
a
yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
The movie about the conscientious objector during World War II. And I just found that movie like incredibly beautiful, and it made me like reflect on like that whole idea of being a conscientious objector and just war and my own like ancestors, because I'm 100% German, my heritage, and so I was thinking about that within the context of that, and it was just like, yeah, I thought about that movie for days after it ended, and I still think about it from time to time. And um, yeah, I don't know why that movie kind of slipped through the cracks a bit. I mean,
It
it's all
did.
about Tree of Life nowadays, but I personally think A Hidden Life is just as good as Tree of Life. And but yeah, that's what came to mind.
No, that movie is a favorite of my parents, and and
Hmm.
my very Catholic siblings, for reasons that might be obvious, because for some reason, right around, like, actually, what did it, for Malik, his kind of his Catholic, like, awakening
Yeah.
as a filmmaker. It was Jim Caviezel himself. Like, Jim Caviezel told this story at a Focus conference that my sister was
Mhm.
at, right around the time that Passion of the Christ came out. They were doing the rollout, and giving screenings to, Catholic communities at the time. And he told a story about how he was visiting, just he was just trying to get a gig, so he just was asked to go to the director's house to meet him, and he was saying a rosary while, like, sitting on the couch after being, let in by the director's wife. And of course that director is Terrence Malick. And that's his wife at, I'm pretty sure, still to this day. And
Mhm.
that, like, woke up her Catholicism, and then you really started seeing that tinge to his works, just to, like, that sort of that spirituality, like, really started seeping in. So that's interesting.
Mhm.
I'm glad you brought that movie up, because you're right. It People really started sleeping on him after Night of Cups, and like,
Yeah.
and wasn't there like a music festival movie he made that, like, never got released?
Oh yeah. Well, it did
It
eventually
did.
get really, yeah. What's it called? Like song. It's like Song of Songs or something like that, or
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact name, but yes, yeah, there's like a music festival movie, and Night of Cups in that movie I think actually came out in the same year.
Oh, it totally,
Yeah,
slipped by
yeah.
me. But yeah, if you have the time, go check out, like, Stories of Old. He makes
Mhm.
really good content that is worth the time. And the this one in particular, really struck a chord with me. And yeah, so that's something that can be sought out. We're going to put the link in the details there so you can find it. But let's move on to the watch list, and I will take the lead I think like the second season of Smiling Friends is like just come out or will be coming out, and I've been watching the first season of it, like when I can, because it's decidedly not appropriate for children. But it's where's there it is. Okay, the it's by way of like two like YouTube animator type guys, like the people behind Oni Plays, and it has lots of cameos by like Mike from Red Letter Media is in the first episode, and it's just these goofy little weirdos whose job it is to just make someone smile, and everything is very Adult Swim, very surreal, very edgy, but it has a wholesome heart at its center. And even though like I'm like left completely disturbed for 90% of every episode, it always leaves me in a good place, which is kind of a really hard tightrope to walk for something as bizarre as this.
Yeah, I'm glad that, one of us watched this. I feel like this show has really like taken off in the last like month or so, where like as far as Adult Swim animated stuff goes, I feel like this is like the most press I've seen an Adult Swim show get since like maybe like Rick and Morty took off. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad one of us watched it. What is it most akin to as far as like other Adult Swim shows?
It it kind of reminds me of like a Aqua Teen Hunger Force, but
Okay.
like it's but decidedly more of this era of like internet humor. Yeah, and and what yeah, it's very different from Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty is all about nihilism, and this is
Mhm.
about fighting nihilism through absurdity, which is
Okay.
always a notion I can appreciate. Now let's move on to the next entry on the watch list. Matt is gonna discuss Kinds of Kindness.
Yeah, went out to the theaters to see this one. I think, Yorgos Lanthimos, he's officially at like the carte blanche stage of his career, where his last film was mostly critically acclaimed. It's probably his most accessible, and it's his most well liked by sort of the general populace, and it won Oscars, of course. So for his next film, he decides to go back to his old writing partner and basically make his most impenetrable movie since The Killing of a Sacred Deer. And I personally, I count that as a win. I've already sort of given my thoughts on, his last two films, The Favorite and Poor Things, and how I thought that him sort of changing up his writing partner was a mistake, and they're much more basic films. But this movie is basically three short films stacked end to end, which I didn't really know beforehand. And there's this sort of tinge of weirdness and supernaturalness to each one. And so I sort of thought of it as like, what if Are You Afraid of the Dark, but if it was written by Greek perverts? And that's basically like what it is. And yeah, one of these, the first one basically explores this strange like dom sub relationship between a boss and his employee. Basically the boss, played by Willem Dafoe, makes every decision for Jesse Plemons in his life, down to like the things that he eats and where he goes at what time. And then the second film is about a man his wife returns home after having been missing for a long time, but she doesn't quite seem like she's the same person she was when she left. And then the third short film is about a cult that is basically searching for somebody that can perform miracles. And part of what makes this interesting for me is I really have enjoyed looking at all the different interpretations that people are coming away with it from, because I think that's what Lanthimos does best. That's what I think makes movies his best movies, is people coming away with different things. And that's why, I didn't so much like Poor Things, because I thought that movie was unequivocally about, female autonomy and empowerment and moral agency. And I don't think there's really that many ways you can look at it other than that. And something like this is open to so many interpretations, both apparent and hidden, from everything from control and power dynamics and relationships to subjugation and rebellion to knowing when you should challenge authority or knowing when you should go along with power structures because they provide stability. There's even like some really weird like religious stuff here, like exploration of Christianity as far as like specifically between God and his followers. And so very, very interesting stuff. I know that some people have gone whole hog on that theory and that they think that each one of these three stories represents the, like Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And like each one of the stories, I don't know if I'd go that far. It's a bit too literal for me, but
Yeah.
it is interesting. And so, yeah, I mean, I love this. It's a little unwieldy. It's 160 minutes long, but I was never bored. And I think that that's, a testament to how interesting it is too. If I had any criticism, I guess it would be that I don't think there is really any like tangible connection between these three short stories other than their thematic elements. And so something like this probably would have been better released as like three short films on Netflix, like they did with the Wes Anderson short films.
Yeah.
And then they wouldn't be inextricably tied to each other for all of eternity because they really don't need to be next to each other, And so I think they would have been probably more successful for some people if they would have been released like on Netflix, like one a week for 3 weeks or something like that. But otherwise, yeah, I loved it. And I hope to talk about it again after you have seen it.
I'll see it, shortly.
Mhm.
I think I'll be able to squeeze it in at some point. And so is it all of the main cast, do they exist throughout all of the movies?
Yeah, it's the same actors, but they're just playing different roles basically in each
Okay.
one. Like after every short film, you actually get credits
Oh,
after
really?
every single one. Yeah, instead of getting credits at the very end of the movie, he puts the credits at the end of each one.
That's weird. Okay.
Yeah.
So, like, which one do you? Because Jesse Plemons won Best Actor at the Cannes Film Festival. Which of
Mhm.
the three performances do you think won that for him, or were they like all as a whole worthy of something like that?
Probably the first one
Don't do that.
because like I said in the first short, he plays this sort of grunt employee at this like office company where his boss is essentially controlling every aspect of his life and he tries to break free from that and he sort of comes to learn that he actually enjoyed the structure of it more than he did not. And so he's the main character of that one, and I think that's probably the one that he won for.
Right on. Well, I'm glad it's a return to form, because
Mhm.
yeah, like seeking the most obvious interpretation of a thing, is the definition of a lack of curiosity from a viewer. It might just appeal to your own sensibilities, and like the killing of a sacred deer is like still haunts me. And Dogtooth like still haunts me. So like I don't know, like I'd much rather have a reason to come back to reconsider something. So looking
Mhm.
forward to that. What has been getting people's panties in a twist though, and causing a lot of division amongst viewers and critics, is the latest season of The Bear. I haven't
Mhm.
seen the whole thing, but a lot of people really called out the first episode of the season a little unfairly, I think, because yeah, it breaks the form a little bit. It's essentially like a tone poem episode. You're just constantly drifting through like years of Carmi's like experience as a chef at every single kitchen he's worked at, and you just like in brief, and then you also like kind of see his reaction to the fallout of the disastrous opening night when he gets locked in the freezer. And it I really liked it. Like I thought that was a good setup, and it just really got you underneath his skin. You see the true drudgery of kitchen life, where it's like you just like break yourself over like a table all day long, and you just come home reeking of like sweat and grease and food, and you just pass out on the couch in your dirty clothes. Like it. I really thought it was excellent, and that I was really surprised to hear that so many people hated it. And it just makes me wonder, well, what the fuck did you people expect this show to be? We know what it is at this point, and it's just doing what it does, but it just took a discrete 30 minutes to really just explore that thing very directly. And I thought it worked really, really well. And I'll have to see where I hear him, honey. I'll get to him in a second. And I'll just have to see where it goes from here. Maybe the people who are more, further in, who have seen the whole thing can more justifiably, explain their dislike. But where I'm at now, I just can't see it. I'm like, this show is finding itself, in a very self-assured way, as opposed to getting aimless and lost and not knowing what it's doing. That is not what I'm seeing. Like they are in command. Okay. It's like the getting into Succession once it hit that third season, it really took, like, not that it's like as good as Succession, but it's following the same trajectory of the increase in quality and value that one can get out of it, I would say.
Nice. Yeah. I find it interesting that, like, I can tell there are certain people out there that aren't liking it so much, because the most like prevalent conversation I'm seeing about this show now is just about whether or not you ship its main characters. And I don't know if you've seen any of that, but there's people out there that are writing whole like articles and essays about how like it would be absolutely devastating if the two main characters got together.
Yeah, and that's a trend within the audience as well that I just really despise. Like, half of the reason why anyone's watching The Acolyte right now is just trying to pair people up in their minds in their own headcanon. And it's like, is that all you're getting out of it? It's like, did Tumblr literally rot the brains of like an entire swath of the audience, where that's the only way they can contextualize or enjoy something, is just like trying to figure out who's going to pair up? Like, that bugs me a lot. All right, moving on. We're going to go to the main event here today, which is Ty West's trilogy closer, supposedly, MaXXXine. Matt, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so if X sort of delivered exactly what we expected in a fun, entertaining way, Pearl sort of subverted our expectations with a surprising amount of emotional depth. I kind of struggle to find the hook of MaXXXine. Like, this movie is derivative to a fault. I think it's easily the worst of the X trilogy. The word that kind of comes to mind, or came to mind, as I sort of sat in theater there as the lights came up, was lackluster. Like, it was neither good nor bad. It's just kind of inert, if anything. I think it's superficially well made. The music, the costumes, the photography, the 1980s aesthetic, it's all on point, especially for a movie that reportedly cost about $1 million.
What?
But I find that this movie is as hollow as the decade that it is set in. It's essentially, Ty West's take on Brian De Palma. But like, who even among the general audience even understands these references that he's making? It just seems so like, just like indulgent, and he seems intent on just proving his like horror film nerd credentials, and he forgot to make a compelling narrative. And I think that at this stage of his career, I think Ty West is dangerously close to becoming the next Eli Roth. And what makes me say that is, when you look at somebody like Eli Roth, he is so indulgent when it comes to like embracing his like his horror film nerddom, where he's like, I need to cram as much like Lucio Fulci references in my movies as possible. I don't give a shit if the movie suffers because of it. I need to just cram all this stuff in here. Whereas you look at somebody like Quentin Tarantino, who is sort of the same like film nerd ilk, where he puts his movies in these decades. He indulges those tendencies to put that stuff on screen, but then he also finds a way to wedge in a good plot or wedge in good characters. And I think that Ty West is becoming sort of the Eli Roth type of that sort of those two sort of avenues you could take. And so yeah, I don't know. I didn't I thought this movie was fine, I guess, but it was just kind of there. So yeah, what
Yeah.
did you think, Chuck?
No, I largely agree with you, across the board. Because, yeah, like everything narratively is incredibly obvious. Like from the moment you saw X, and of course we, got the hint that there was going to be a third at the end of Pearl, I knew exactly what was going to happen in this movie. And he didn't play with that. He didn't like spoiler alert. If you haven't seen MaXXXine, I am going to spoil something for you that maybe should have been obvious to begin with. But she came from a very religious family, and because this movie is set in the 80s, at the height of the culture wars, between the very Puritan religious Christians of the era and the porn and graphic excesses of slasher horror movies of the time, there was a lot of conflict over that. So of course it makes sense that our church girl turned porn star would eventually have a cult leading father infiltrate Hollywood and find some way to, do something to her, now that she's almost at the peak that she's been chasing her whole life. And he didn't do enough to set that up. He wasted so much time with all these little, red herrings that were not red herrings. Like, I don't like, I'm trying like having the Night Stalker be in the backdrop of all of this is just window dressing. Never did I ever think that the Night Stalker was the one doing what was going on. If anything, they were just the cloak that the real villains were wearing to obscure their activities and have the police be looking elsewhere instead of at them. But if this had been done well, we would have been seeing MaXXXine interact with people who were covert members of the cult. They would have been peppered throughout the story and the narrative. They would have been the waiters. They would have been, they allude to them like being the camera operators at her audition, because how else do they get a copy of that footage for the movie they're making? And
Yeah.
There would have been actual like payoff to at the conclusion, be like, oh, I recognize that person and that person and that person. There is just no actual thought put into what happens in this movie. And the first two entries were just so taut and so tight and clean with their approach, and maybe making them during COVID contributed to that. But now that everything's wide open and they can shoot in Hollywood and Los Angeles and just have it be as maximalist as possible, they forgot to actually fill it with substance. And it's just his references. It's just, oh, isn't this shot cool? But then they don't even make any memorable kills. Like,
Yeah.
they were all such a letdown. And he teased us at the beginning when MaXXXine pulls the gun on that would-be rapist and then crushes his balls.
Buster Keaton.
Yeah, like that was great. I loved that. And I was, and that was like as pulpy and gross as and gory as I could have wanted. And then he just never went further than that. And it was just really boring and obvious. And but that said, Kevin Bacon steals this movie. I want a movie about that character now. Can he have a spinoff? Can we see his like villainous work in Louisiana? That could be a fun movie. But they, of course, remove all possibility of there being a like sequel involving him. But yeah, like this is
he was a way better antagonist than Maxine's father. Like it's too bad he didn't make it to the end. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying. Like if you're going to do this exploitation gore thing, you have to make sure that your practical effects are good. And for the most part, I found that they were always either underwhelming or just looked plain bad. Like in the case of the video store clerk's death,
ugh.
I thought that looked awful. Like there's that part where he gets like slashed on his eye, and it looks so awful. Like just the effects and I didn't even know what was going on in Halsey's death scene, and then. But yeah, the biggest offender was Kevin Bacon's death, because it was priming you for something so cool, like we're gonna see this guy get squished to death, and his bones and his eyeballs are gonna pop out, and his like he's gonna explode, and then all that happens is you see like blood like seep under the car door, and like that's it, and it's like, oh my god, this was so lame. And so yeah, I mean, if you're gonna do the whole exploitation thing, you gotta do it. And
You gotta
the
go
only
all
thing
out.
that really yeah, the only thing that really even got a reaction out of my theater was the head blowing up at the end. The
Yeah.
Maxine's father, and I mean, that was admittedly, it looked pretty cool, but by then I think people were pretty checked out.
In the theater I saw it in, it wasn't very full, but
Mhm.
because I had to see this on July 4th. But
Okay.
the hilarious thing that happened was when Kevin Bacon gets brained over the head and falls down like a sack of potatoes. Someone just like let out like a snort laugh at it, and then everyone just like busted laughing, because there's just silence after that moment. And like that was the biggest like laugh that the movie got, and the biggest reaction, because otherwise everyone just kind of looked bored. Because like the runtime for MaXXXine is the same as X, but it just feels like such a longer movie, and not for good reasons. Because did you notice that MaXXXine like basically stopped talking through after the first 20-30 minutes up until even after after the finale, like when she's dreaming about what her life is going to be after this, it's mostly just her walking around doughy-eyed and having people talk to her, and they'll like prompt her to say something and she'll just be like, yeah, or like,
Interesting.
no.
Yeah, I guess I didn't notice that so much.
She doesn't have much to say compared to
now that you
Pearl,
bring it up,
that was largely carried just by her talking to herself throughout it. So maybe they were trying to go in a different direction with it, because I noticed that, because she had a writing credit on Pearl, didn't she, Mia Goth?
I think so. Yeah, and on this one
So
she has a producer's credit and acting, of course. But yeah, I didn't notice that, but now that you bring it up, I could totally see that, because a lot of the characters around her are doing the talking, and I found that to be so infuriating at times, because I thought that like Michelle Monaghan,
Oh God.
Bobby Cannavale, and Elizabeth Debicki
Is
were
it your
all.
birthday? Why did that
Oh, I got balloons.
why is
I
that
have no
happening?
idea why this is happening, but
What is going on?
I have no idea. That was so weird.
It's your Discord birthday, maybe.
I guess so. But yeah, those three characters, those three side characters, are just like quip machines, where they're just saying these constant like cornball one-liners. Like, in this town, you can become famous or infamous, just stuff like that. And it was so like corny anytime they were on screen. And I want to note this as a side note. I was trying to come up with remember the quotes from this film yesterday when I was sort of preparing my outline. And as just a side note, I want to say that there is so many basic bitch TikTok girls that are latching on to that I will not accept the life I do not deserve line from this movie, and they're making all these inspo social media posts about it. And so yeah, it's just I find that very, very funny,
The
that
mantra
is
that
sort of the
was
case.
imbued in her by her evil Puritan Christian father. That's
Yeah.
like that's what they're latching on to. So that's very bizarre, but that definitely feeds into the totally me phenomenon.
Oh yes.
Because you know, MaXXXine is very memeable. I'll grant you that, but she's the least interesting she's ever been in this movie. I think it's everything is just so basic. You know, as far as her characterization, you know, she's just I get it. She's a scream queen. Things just happen to her, and maybe there's layers of commentary that we just aren't getting, I guess. And maybe like because we'll get to the last shot because like maybe that is the explanation for that. But just about the two cops, they were so weird. I didn't like. Did they? And this is an aspect of the movie that I wish they would have gone in. That like would have been a more satisfying twist.
That they end up being the killer or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I found their presence to be at times really, really corny, and then at times like just like really weird as far as like their actions. Like there's that one scene. I was just saying, Chuck, there's that one scene where I find their actions completely like inexcusable sometimes where they're rolling the dead body of the video store clerk out of the
What
building,
the
and
fuck is
Michelle
up with that?
Monaghan, she lifts the sheet to show MaXXXine, and I'm like, why did she do that? Why is she showing a dead body to this crowd of people? It was so weird.
And that feeds into what I was going to say before my son almost choked on a penny.
Oh,
Like it would have been so much more interesting if MaXXXine was the killer. If she was the one
yes.
like murdering other actresses or like other porn stars, you know, people who were her competition.
Yes.
That would have been way better. You know, like you could still have the Brian De Palma stuff. You could still have the people in the cult trying to get to her. But like because like there is a scene where like they're just like watching her, the cops are from a car, and they're like, should we bring her in now? And she's like, no, I want to see how she reacts. So like he put that seed in there that's what the cops theory was. And that would have been way more interesting if she had been the one killing all of her friends. And then because the cult gets involved, she can just pass her crimes off onto them, you know, in some way, especially since those two cops seeming like one legitimately gets offed and the other one we're assuming just broke her neck tumbling down, you know, the hill underneath the sign or something. Because yeah, you're right. Like you noted it. Michelle Monaghan just disappears from the movie after that. And I think it's because she's either dead or in a coma, you know, so she can't, you know, offer any of her theories on what's going on. Missed opportunity there. It would have been a neat twist. And it would have kind of carried forward with the legacy of Pearl a little bit more. Because like that's deliberately like what that movie kind of, you know, shows is that the qualities that were in Pearl are in MaXXXine too. Not simply just that they're played by the same actress. Like the characters were a lot alike. And they didn't do enough with that. I mean, or Ty West did. And that I found very frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, there's almost when you take these movies as a whole, as three movies, as a trilogy, at this point, Pearl seems completely out of place to me, where there's pretty much no connection between Pearl and MaXXXine. It's almost like the movies are taken better as two duologies where you either watch X and Pearl together or you watch X and MaXXXine. But I don't even want to think, like, what would you think if you were the person who had just happened to watch like Pearl and then MaXXXine? It's
Yeah,
like
it doesn't work.
it's like what, it doesn't work at all, and it's very strange in that way.
Did you think that they used the house from Psycho in an effective way, or is that also just, oh, we're here in Hollywood, we can use it?
I think it's more so that because yeah, I mean, I think that's the House from Psycho is actually a part of like the Universal Studios tour. Like if you go to that theme park, and so I'm sure that had to do with it. There, it was an easy, budget friendly way to get some sort of backlot in the movie because I'm pretty sure that was just like the Universal backlot or something like that. But yeah, not, I mean, she used it as basically like a hiding place, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah, and she did see Pearl in the window for like a brief
That's right.
moment,
Yeah.
and like
Mhm.
it would have, we could have done with more of that. Like there wasn't enough exploration into what she had to do to make it to that point. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like after X, it's like, yeah, she flees that, the the that carnage in Texas, and she just goes to Los Angeles and just gets found on the street by Giancarlo Esposito. His wig was atrocious. That
Yeah, it
was
was.
that was really really bad. But I liked his character. Give that guy, he better be in the sequel if there is one, because Ty West wants to make a fourth movie, which would maybe serve the duology of it better, or more properly make a trilogy out of it, going from X and MaXXXine to whatever that next one would be. But at the same time, I don't know if I want another one, because he's the well is dry now, clearly. If he
Yeah.
can't actually fill it with any of his own ideas anymore. And because I've seen some Reddit discourse on effectively giving him a pass because, oh yeah, he deliberately made it bad guys, and that is just such a weird level of cope for just like wanting to like it, no matter what. Like I think he needs some accountability here. People need to let him know that he fumbled it on this one.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, certainly. And yeah, before we move off this, you had alluded to it earlier, but yeah, I do want to know your thoughts on like the final shot of the movie, which was basically Maxine's head on like a bed, as if in the movie she's in, she has basically been decapitated, and then the killer has placed her head on just a bed.
Yeah,
And so what? Yeah, what is going on there? What is the idea behind that? Because I did not. That just went completely over my head, I guess.
some people are saying that it's a. In a second, honey. Oh my god, if the mic picked that up, that's hilarious. But that it's a reference by Ty West to House of the Devil and like Greta Gerwig's
Okay.
head, and I'm not quite connecting the dots there. But to me, I think it's a signifier of the reality that all Hollywood actresses, especially those involved in horror movies, have to live with. Which is that their careers, yeah, sometimes get jump started, but often you just go nowhere, and all you're known for is getting brutally murdered in a movie, and then the detritus of the film production can live on a lot further than you and have more value than you. Like the Red Letter Media guys will buy the mold created from her life cast and then recreate her head to like have in their like prop collection. Like that's the future for her. Like that's actually all that will live on from Maxine, and it's kind of a bittersweet and like kind of like an acknowledgement that despite her triumph at the end, what did she really gain? It's like she is just a head on a bed.
Yeah, okay, I could see that, I guess. But yeah, it was just so like in the moment. It was very odd. It was just like, what is happening here? And so,
That was my reaction
um,
initially too. I had to ponder your question a little bit more to really arrive at that conclusion.
mhm. But yeah, to answer the question about whether he should continue this, because yeah, like you said, both him and Mia Goth are out there talking about a fourth, I guess, and I would say no, that you don't need to do a fourth. I want this guy to go back
November.
to
Okay, Kim.
just doing one-off movies, because I think that's when he was probably at his best, because
Luca.
I still think X is the best one of this trilogy, and that was only when we were aware of the one movie.
Yeah.
But then in addition to that, House of the Devil's great. Um, in the Valley of Violence, his weird sort of like direct to streaming western that he did with Ethan Hawke and John Travolta is actually pretty good. And so, yeah, he should go back to just doing the one-off movies again.
Yeah, Innkeepers is also another one that I like quite a bit.
Yeah. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and of course his brief cameo in You're Next also kind of lives on in
Yeah.
my memory as well. But yeah, that's MaXXXine. If you want to be a completionist, see it, but understand your mileage may vary depending on your sensibilities, and it's not your fault. It's Ty West's fault. Moving on to the mentionables, we have some really good ones this week, actually. And Matt picked up another James Clavell novel. What can you tell us about Tai-Pan?
Yeah, so this is the
Almost
second
done.
of
You
the
white
Asian
bird.
saga, James Clavell's Asian saga that he's done. And yeah, I mean, I loved Shogun so much, and I was like, I just have to, keep reading this guy. And so Tai-Pan is basically about it sort of fast forwards to the 1840s, and it's about European and American traders in Hong Kong, and they're basically fighting over who controls trading in that region. Chiefly, it's about this fictional character. Uh, I think his name is Dirk Strawn, and he's basically trying to hold on to his position as the leader of trade in Hong Kong, which is what Taipan means. And um, I didn't think that Clavel could write a book as good as Shogun, and this is totally it. I mean, these two books are, if one of them is not better than the other, they're definitely equals. And this is the type of book that the ending of Shogun is sort of, well, it is also fantastic. It's
Luca.
kind of a drip feed of an ending where you're slowly sort of realizing what is happening, and that basically Blackthorn is fucked and he
Yeah.
is just going to be there forever. But the ending of Taipan literally doesn't hit you until the last sentence of the book. And you're just, when it hits you, it's just like, it leaves you like, fuck yes, like this was awesome. And it's so good. And so yeah, I'm gonna keep reading these books, and now that I've read this, I'm really just wondering why, with the show, with the continuation of Shogun, why don't you turn this into an anthology series and adapt one novel for every season? Because
Yeah.
that's what they should have done, and
I
I
remember
just don't
saying that
understand.
after we reviewed the conclusion of Shogun. I remember saying that.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
because like where can they go in the second season? And I guess their thinking is, oh well, we have like this cast that people like and all that, and we'll just bleed the sucker till it's dry. But this would be a much preferable direction for it to take.
Yeah. But yeah, awesome book, and I'm gonna keep reading them, and I fully endorse them. You can get these books for like $4 at like half price books or on eBay. So yeah, just yeah, go out and get them.
What's the follow up? What's the next one?
It's Gaijin.
There we go. Okay,
Gaijin, yeah.
very good. My mentionable this week is a hot off the presses tabletop gaming setting called Trench Crusade. And the premise of this world is, what if the Templars, instead of being eradicated, as they were in our timeline, what if they realized that they were, going to be expunged, from the medieval European Crusader timeline, and instead found some way to open a gate to hell in Jerusalem. and then it does this, because and then there's just centuries of like holy war between, the forces of New Antioch and the forces of hell. And so like, yeah, it's so grimdark and fucked up. And the art, who does the art? I need to get his name. Just because
It looks like some of this art here. It looks like that one. Oh God, what is his name? That one Russian artist that's like really fucked up that everybody cites.
With like all, with his name starts with a Z, I think.
Yeah.
This is Mike Francina, and
Okay.
I don't play tabletop games, but I love the lore behind them, and this one in particular is just so out there and so cool, and like the world they've created, because it accelerates to like World War I era, and the world is completely changed. Like the new world wasn't explored. There was no age of exploration. It's just been centuries of military investments and fusions of like unholy, and holy relics. And it's so out there and so like, so brutal, but that appeals to me, because I'm getting burnt out on 40K, and I needed something a little more grounded in our actual, our reality to an extent, even though there's nothing grounded, about it, but it at least takes place on Earth, and I love alternate histories, and the art is so good. But yeah, we might have to wrap this up. I have a little girl who needs help wiping.
Okay. Yeah.
But that does it
let's-
for us today. We have MaXXXine that you should maybe check out. Check out our top 5s of the year so far. And Matt, tell us a little bit about your minisode next week.
Yeah, so next week I'm going to be doing a minisode about Deadpool and Wolverine, and basically about how I guess if anything the movie should not exist, and it's a shame that it exists. And so yeah, look forward to that next week.
Because I'll be honest with you, when I first saw the trailer for it, I was excited and I want to see it. But I understand where you're coming from, so I look forward to hearing your thoughts more fully. Thank you for joining me, Matt, and have yourself a good couple weeks, everybody.
Yep, see ya.